Thanks for joining us for another episode of The Ghost Furnace. I am here with my cohort, Nick Pennsylvania. How you doing, Nick?
Really good. And I'm going to give a heads up. My daughter is making Christmas cookies, so if you hear any banging, clanging, and jangling, that is what is happening in the background.
Well, it is that time of the year, and we figured we wanted to talk to you guys this evening about something that we have known about for about 10 days. We were super excited and wanted to bring on someone who we had, I guess, back in February of this year to talk, and that is Jamie King. How are you doing, Jamie?
I'm doing really good, and I'm happy to be back.
Fantastic, man. We're excited to be talking to you. Just to kind of set the stage about what we wanted to speak about tonight, I was perusing Instagram, as a lot of us do, and I came across a post from Jamie and Jenny on their Pitt, Ohio Bigfoot research page, and it was a very interesting looking print, which, anyone who's into different lore of this sort, prints are up there with full body apparitions and things like that as far as the holy grails of, in this case, cryptozoology, maybe. So what we want to do is talk to Jamie tonight and kind of get the story behind this print. And I'll say ahead of time also, if you want to see the print that we're talking about, I do have Jamie's permission to, we'll post it on the Instagram, Facebook, and Nick will probably put it up on the YouTubes. So without any more ado, Jamie, can you tell us about the print you found?
All right. So the background on all of this is my wife and I are Bigfoot researchers. So we've had an encounter in Pennsylvania, in Mercer County, PA, Western PA, with what we believe was Bigfoot. So it kind of changed everything for us. And now we do this micro study. So in the process of this micro study, like years, it's been years now that we've been hiking, documenting, we take notes, we photograph, we're building a body of evidence to support our encounter with what we believe is Bigfoot. So we were hiking, I had the exact date, but it was this, past month. What did you say, like 10 days ago? Probably about 10 days ago.
Right.
We were hiking at Shenango Reservoir and we came across this print, and that's Army Corps of Engineer land. So we found this print. We started looking at the print, and we watched, we followed, it was a track way. So these prints were going into the water. So the prints that we found were like dog-like, very canine looking, but we took notice, and the reason why we documented it was because they're very, very large dog-like prints. And I wasn't sure if it was a coyote. I wasn't sure if it's a wolf. I know we don't have wolves in Pennsylvania anymore. So the idea was that we were just going to photograph it, take notes, and that's what we did. And then I came home and I posted it on my friend Bill Rigby's paranormal page, and I posted it on one of my, my Instagram and something else. But when I posted it on Bill's group, people started commenting, like they were really, really commenting. And it was just the photograph at that point of the print itself. And the responsible side of me as a researcher is I had to go back out and cast it because I knew that I needed to get details with this print. And I'm out in this area of Shenango, and Jenny couldn't go with me at the time. So I decided that I was just going to go out, and it gets dark early. So it's probably about 4:30. It starts getting dark. I'm casting this print. And as I'm sitting there with this print, waiting for it to dry, and everything's going through my mind. The whole micro study that we do, the people that I've interviewed over the years in Mercer County that have had what they claim to be Bigfoot. And then that's always in the back of my mind, Dogman, because Shenango Valley has been known for this thing called Shenango Dog Boy. It's part of the lore of this area. Some of that's been debunked, but some of it is based in, mythological stuff. And if I believe in Bigfoot, then I should also possibly believe that there's a Dogman type thing that exists out there. So that's where the print is right now. I have the print. When I casted it, I'm looking at this thing and I'm thinking to myself, this is really, really huge. It's very big. It looks like nothing that I've ever seen, as a print in the forest. And I'm kind of glad that I have it.
I have a question because Brendan immediately sent me the photo to look at as well of the casting. one of the questions I had, because I didn't see anything there for scale, about how long is it?
So the length of it is it's almost 11 inches long, and that's long. It's about 5.5 inches wide.
Right.
So what you're looking at is a print, and it's very canine like, and there's also nails, so you can see the nails of it. I tried to compare online, like I put it out there, and then when I had the cast, then I was like, really, like when you see the actual print that's from the ground as a cast form, there's so much more detail, and I really started researching online, like any kind of canine that would leave that kind of marking. But what makes this print super odd is that there's a heel impression, and I'm not a biologist, but I know that dogs don't leave like a heel impression. And I had to go back through the comments that were made on this website and start reading them. And people were saying like it looks like a kangaroo, it looks like an ostrich, and like when you have a website or a forum where people can get on and they're interested in something like Bigfoot or they're interested in Dogman, you'll get all kinds of opinions and thoughts on the whole thing. But for me, it's more about like I have to do my own research, and I did it for Bill's group just to see what people had thought. But I really didn't expect some of the comments that were made there, on the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I look at it and it looks very dog-like, but the dimensions you're giving, because when I was talking about it with my wife and we were saying, well, what are like the largest dogs that you may encounter that people own? And it's like the Irish Wolfhound, the Great Dane, and it would be interesting to cross-reference the two prints because nearly a foot long. If it's a Bigfoot type thing, it wouldn't be that small, but that's really big for a dog. My foot is that large, or it's that long, but it's probably not that wide.
Right. Honestly, like I found prints that I believe that were Bigfoot prints, and none of them have ever actually reached that length. I mean, there's some that have been that length and a little bit bigger that I believe are Bigfoot, but like I also have to look at this, like a cast is, and a footprint is actually damage done to the earth. So that print is also you have to look at like the earth itself, like how is it damaged in the earth, what kind of soil it was. All those things play out. Like if it was soft soil, is it going to be larger looking? And like you said, with dogs, I had to go on and I'm looking at different dogs that could potentially be that print and somehow got morphed in a way. And the only thing I could come up with was Mastiff is one of the largest, and there's a Tibetan Mastiff that is the largest. The Corso dog, I think it's called Corso.
King Corsos, yeah, those are huge.
Well, and that's one of the things I was wondering too, and I'm really glad that you brought it up about the different, because you said that the prints were going into the water, and I know a lot of the Abominable Snowman prints, there's those photos, and it's because they're in the snow and it's because of the wind, it elongates the print. I'm really curious, the sample that you took, the one that you cast, was that pretty consistent with the size and appearance of the other prints that were there?
Yes, it was. But, like Jenny and I have trained our minds to observe everything around us, because this is part of our micro study. If we're going to build this body of evidence that there is Sasquatch or something of that nature, that we have to look at everything. And, like what we did is we measured the prints, we measured the stride between the prints, and then we're looking and observing at the area where it's at. So there is water there. Whatever this thing was, had gotten to the water's edge and it had dug out this area. So there's an area of the beach line that's dug out, like it typically, like an animal would do. It's dug out, and then there was this large fish that was partially eaten, and then the prints just disappear. Like you look and you see them in the water, and then they just disappear. And like for the past few days, I knew I was coming on your podcast. I was starting to research wolves. And the idea that, it could be possibly a wolf. If it is a dog man, that's part, if I believe in that, I don't know. I would like to think that there's not something that's crossbred with the human, but I also am open to the idea that something could shapeshift. And I have to look at the lore of this area, which is that Dogman and the stories of Sasquatch and the Dogman. The other thing that I didn't really say, and I didn't even put on Bill's website, and I kind of stopped putting it on anything until I know more about it. And you guys are like the first people I'm really talking to about it. There were actually human prints near it, but we're talking about November. So this is November, and there's a human print that's near it, like a barefoot print. And I have photos of those. So I'm kind of like putting this all together, mentally trying to compartmentalize all of these prints that I found and look at it objectively, without jumping to conclusions.
And this well, because I have like a few thoughts that run immediately to my head. I mean, we are in Western Pennsylvania. It has been a little warmer a few weeks ago, but it's still cold enough that if you're wading in the water in your bare feet, that's a bad idea. It's a good idea if you like hypothermia. It's a bad idea. These were fresh human.
They were fresh. I would
well.
say I would probably estimate just by looking at them, because I see prints all the time. Right. I would probably guess that they were at least 3 days old when we found them.
And I'm sure I'm probably saying something you've already thought, specifically because you brought up shape-shifting and everything. Obviously I'm the one that's going to say that, of course somebody could. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility that somebody took their shoes off. It was a bad idea, but I'm really curious as to how you feel are they connected?
Well, when you look at the community of people that research any of these cryptids, you have different people, and the way they think is there's a lot of scientific people. There's what you would consider woo, and there's also what you would consider like true biologist. I would put myself in a category of woo, and I only put myself in that category because my encounter with what I believe to be Sasquatch was super spiritual to me, right, and also to my wife.
Mm-hmm. And I think that I think that whenever you're studying things like this, you guys are going about it the right way, in the sense that like you're understanding your perspective on something that's out in reality that you're trying to gain knowledge of, and the perception that you're bringing to these things is, it's something you have to consider when you're trying to be objective, because there's no such thing as being truly objective, but you're trying,
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying, and I'm okay if I'm wrong with something. And I have found evidence in the past that I've re-examined and looked at and thought, this could be human. There's a human element attached to this whole thing. And even with those prints that are human, they're human. Mm-hmm. I would consider they're human because it's a barefoot in this area that they probably shouldn't be.
Right. And I think that the human prints really add a unsettling element to it for me. To me, that's almost like scarier, because the most mundane situation we can think of to explain what you guys were able to find is that there was someone walking around in 30-degree weather without shoes on near the time that a uncommonly large canine was walking around. Let's say that's the situation. That's still pretty weird, and something worth wondering, like, what was going on. If that's the Occam's razor, then that's still, I think, unusual enough that like it should catch people's attention.
Well, and talk about unsettling. You talked about going back there and it's dusk as you're waiting on this cast to dry. How were you like real on edge? Not only just because of you've already recognized like this is very different for you. Talk about that.
So I was very on edge, and I was super excited. So there's adrenaline going through me. Like, I need to cast these prints. I need to before it rains, because it was going to rain the following day, and I wanted to make sure I got out there. So I get out there and I have the casting material. I get out of my vehicle, and there's a parking lot. It's not too far from where the prints are, because it's an old Army Corps of Engineer beach. So there's a deserted beach there, like a beach house. that's where people would change their clothes and shower. That's abandoned, and it's sort of back in. And I parked there, and when I went out, it started getting dark. So I'm casting the print, and I have it cast. I'm super excited. And then I sat on this retaining wall that's right there near the beach, and I'm sitting there, and the whole time I kept like looking up, and there's a full moon. So there's a full moon, and like this werewolf. I mean, in that world, werewolf and dogman are two different things. I'm finding this out.
Mm-hmm.
But in my mind, I'm looking at the moon and I'm thinking to myself, it's getting darker. I look at my phone, it's 14%. I called Jenny and I'm like, Jenny, it's getting darker, and I'm waiting for this thing to dry, like get hard enough so I can pull it out of the ground. And I'm a terrible caster in general, which this cast luckily came out really well. And as I'm sitting there on this retaining wall, I'm starting to think about all the people that I've interviewed within that close vicinity, and really it's not even like a half a mile from where we had what we believe a Bigfoot encounter, which adds to the whole thing. So then I'm sitting there and I remembered this one encounter that's off of this road where this beach is, and it was a group of people in a vehicle, and they watched this thing cross the road, and they said it was very canine-like, and it was on 2 feet, and then just disappeared. They described it in detail to me, so that's going through my mind. Then there's another person that contacted me because they own a it's like a farm where they butcher cows and they butcher animals, and you can go and you can purchase these things.
Right.
They contacted me because they had animals on their farm that were killed, and I had gone there to interview these people to talk to them about this, the animals that died on their property. And as I'm there talking to these people, they said, we don't really want to talk about it. One of their employees contacted me, and then the owner didn't want to talk about it because it's their business. So then that's going through my mind. And
it's stuff like that. It, like you mentioned earlier, there's like the more science-minded side of all of this, which is kind of what I refer to often as like the whole flesh and blood side of things. Yeah. Then there's what you mentioned is like the woo side of things. I think that when you talk about stuff like this, when you're on that woo side of things, and you're thinking of these things that are very flesh and blood sounding stories, like it sounds like an actual animal killing livestock, running around the place. And I think also because that's out of like your kind of paradigm, it is only going to add to how unsettling it feels when you're dealing with that kind of stuff. Because when I've had interesting or weird or possibly paranormal things happen to me when I'm out like in the woods alone, away from folks like you were in this situation, oftentimes it's like unexpected and it's more like interesting or confusing. It's not till after the fact you're like, oh, that was like, you'd almost like don't have time to get nervous, but you went back with that in mind, I think. And I give you a lot of credit because I don't know if everyone would put themselves in that situation like you did.
And I have to ask if you ran back to the car, because I would have.
I'm going to tell you this. I went back to the car to get warm. I let the print sit, and I was thinking to myself, like, if anybody shows up, like the Army Corps of Engineers, those people, the Fish and Game and Wildlife, they know what I do. Like they found me in the woods before, and they're like, Jamie, what do you they know what I'm doing. They gave me their card in case I run into problems, and they said that there's people that have warrants for their arrest. So they know me. So I went back to the car to warm up because it was cold. And literally I was thinking to myself, if anybody comes across me and sees me kneeling at the ground with a shovel and a garbage bag, it doesn't look good.
Exactly. No. Yeah. It looks crazy. Yeah. Yeah. You have those moments where you kind of like, oh, if a muggle or a normal person saw me right now, they'd be like, what is this person up to? Like, it's not like, yeah, exactly. No, that would be kind of unnerving too, for sure.
Well, have you shared this print? I'm kind of curious when you talk about like the game, Fish and Wildlife. I'm really interested to see if they've had any comment. I mean, off record.
They know what I do, and off record, they have talked to me about things that they found and things that they believe. And they've told me that they've seen things that they cannot explain. I have not showed them this print yet. That's on my agenda to show them. I shared it with my friend Bill's group. So then people have been like, this has been crazy because literally I've done this research with Bigfoot, and I've never had this many people contact me about stuff, but this print, and I don't know if it's because in the Dogman world, they don't really have a print. Like I don't know if they exist.
Right.
That's a good point. I've never heard of one. So yeah.
Right. So all these Dogmen group they've been contacting me, and there's an Ohio researcher named Jody Cook. Mm-hmm. He was he's also a Bigfoot researcher, but he coined the word Ohio Grassman. So Ohio Grassman, he's one of the researchers that did that. But he also has taken so many reports that he believes in this thing called Dogman. And his group, like he has different chapters of this North American Dogman project. They contacted me. So one of their researchers from Maine got a hold of me right away, and he's like, send me the pictures. I sent him the pictures, and I didn't send him all of the pictures because Jenny and I both took a lot of pictures of that print and the surrounding area. So I'm still in the process of going through all of this and looking at all of them. And even as I'm talking to you, if I find something that seems like it's human, then it's human, and that's what I'll say. If this seems like it's Dogman, I will say that too. But like I'm leaning towards I don't know.
Right. And I think that's like that Occam's razor, like we said earlier, like that's kind of like the measured approach that you have to take, because like it's so hard to tell either way, because again, like I mentioned earlier, with like what are the most mundane possible explanations. Anyone who's seen bear tracks know that like bear tracks can look really weird sometimes because their front feet and their back feet line up when they walk. So you get
and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but anyone that's looking for tracks as frequently as you are too is going to, whether you're like looking in books and trying to catalog all these things, you just start to recognize. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Brendan, but
no,
yeah.
but that's kind of what I'm saying, is that I think that, for folks who are out there looking at stuff, like you mentioned, doing this micro study and everything, you guys know what is at least typical in that area of the Shenango Reservoir. Yes. And so when you see something that is atypical, it's going to catch your attention. That doesn't mean it's necessarily paranormal, but it's at least different, and
right. I mean, I'll say this too, like with our micro study, we found a lot of things that we add to this list of high strangeness. And, like we found these shelters that are high strangeness. I find in the community that people say they're not really shelters, they're a form of communication. But then I have to also, and this is always in the back of my mind, and literally I don't think about Dogman, but it's always there. It's always there because the Shenango Valley Dog Boy, the Shenango Valley Dog Man, there are many, many stories, but that's not something that I legitimately want to experience. And because there's a negative connotation to the whole thing.
Right. The idea of seeing a road crossing of a Sasquatch, or seeing, any kind of cryptid at a distance across a field. Okay, cool. But like everything you hear about dogmen specifically, like if that's what this print is every time you hear those stories, they're always bad. There's never a mundane, or not a mundane, but there's never a, even dogman experience, it seems like, from the stories.
No, between Dogman and the other lore of Devil Dogs is the other one, the Hellhound sort of thing. But I've got to ask, because you've kind of touched upon it a bit. I mean, a two-part question. Like, one, how has this changed the way you've talked? The first time we spoke to you and your wife, we talked at length about how you became involved in all this because of your personal experience. How has this changed the way you look at a lot of the things you do? And it does seem like this has been a little overwhelming. This is definitely outside of what you've experienced in the past, how much reaction you're getting to this. How are you both handling that? And how has it changed how you look at what you do and how you look at the world around you?
Well, first and foremost, I have to think about my micro study, and that I'm constantly out there looking at stuff. And, they lump people into different categories. You can be in the category of the flesh and blood, or the woo, or whatever. But I want people to understand that I'm in the category of I believe these things are flesh and blood, but I also believe there's a spiritual side to them and there's an energetic side to them where they can leave prints. Even with ghost hunting, people have said to me, like Jenny and I were both tour guides at Mansfield Prison and Haunted Hillview Manor, and people will say, do ghosts leave prints? Absolutely, they do. Like, you can have ghosts touch you, but they can also leave prints. Like, you can leave powder on the ground and you will see footprints, like.
We hear of people getting scratched and everything. That's a pretty common.
Yeah. So I guess like what you're asking me, the question is, how has this changed how I look at things? What it's done for me is it's taken me in the direction of, I don't know a whole lot about Dogman, so I'm going to research it. And that's currently what I'm doing. But I'm also researching wolves in general. Wolves are not part of Pennsylvania. They're no longer here. And I started, like today, I was at work and I'm really like reading about wolves all day.
Well, I will say, though, that the coyotes have been reintroduced into Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And they are, it's my understanding, are actually a hybrid from wolves and coyotes, because we've seen, and Brendan, you got your finger up. I know you got something on this, but I mean, you and I have seen these are coyotes that are taking down animal. They are not coyotes, right. Are kind of like the scavengers typically, but you were going to say something, but then I definitely want to get back to just how are you handling, because it seems like this is just outside of the realm of the interactions that you normally get. That definitely seems like there's a lightning storm going on.
Maybe for me, there's because we had an encounter with what we believe was Bigfoot, I didn't have a negative feeling to that. But when you do throw the word Dogman out there, there's a negative feeling. And it's just, I don't know how else to put it. Mm-hmm. So that's a little more unnerving when you're in the woods. Like, I'm not saying this is Dogman. I'm not saying that because I need more information. But
right. Well, I think that what you're saying also like tracks with what happens kind of historically when people spend more time in nature looking into these things, or when people spend more time looking into stuff spiritually. The deeper you go into these things, the more you realize that there is infinitely more than what you expected initially. And yes, there might be really good things, but there's also really bad things typically. And whenever we get a reminder of the depth of that spectrum, it can kind of shock you, I think.
What were you going to say about coyotes now, Brendan?
Oh, I'm sorry.
We kind of went off.
No.
I wanted to make sure you got that out.
No, the two things about coyotes. One, I think that it's important to remember that this isn't terribly far from where the Zanesville massacre occurred. So I don't think there was any wolves that were.
Can you?
Okay, so
I don't know that.
Oh my God. Okay, so brief history without me Googling anything about the Zanesville massacre.
I was going to say, I definitely know everything about it, but I just want to test Brendan.
Right, yeah. But so there was a guy who owned a large animal park in Zanesville over Ohio, which is I believe eastern Ohio.
Yeah, I know where it's at, yeah.
Yeah, so in Zanesville, this was maybe back in the early 2000s. Or maybe close to 2010. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not Googling this at the time. What happened was there was a guy who had a huge animal park, a bunch of exotic animals, lions, tigers.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yes, yeah. And so the guy shot himself, unfortunately, and let all the animals go. So you had huge animals running around Ohio that were not native.
Yeah, and this is
really
Zanesville is right between Columbus and Pittsburgh, PA.
Right. So, and it's a really sad story because a guy lost his life and they had to end up killing a lot of the animals, like chimpanzees and tigers. It was really sad. But for a long time after that, in a lot of the cryptozoological community, every time someone would see not necessarily a cryptid animal, but what's the word they use for an animal that isn't native to the area, like an out of place animal, like kangaroos and stuff like that, that can survive for a while. But what I was getting to with the Zanesville thing is I don't think there were any wolves that were not accounted for, but I think that's even though wolves aren't native to Pennsylvania anymore, large dogs. But that's why I think it's good that you're doing the research that you are, because you're saying, okay, even if a exotic animal was loose, which isn't likely but not completely impossible, that, it doesn't sound like that would even account for some of this activity that you're seeing, because even if the print is somehow a wolf or something, that's not accounting for the historical and folklore stories that you had mentioned earlier. So there's a lot going on here, is what I was going to say with that.
So, like, one of my aha moments just today, after like reading some of this stuff, was how a wolf will walk. Is they walk on their tiptoes, and then they'll drop down, and wolves leave a scent. So they'll leave a scent in their print for the rest of the pack. And I was like, that's interesting, because some of them had like that heel-like print.
You mentioned
then there was another that didn't have it. And then there was another that did have it. So it was really weird. It was almost like, is this an injury that I'm not picking up on?
Right.
But I was looking at the behavior of wolves, like if just because I need to.
Right.
And how they walk, the scent pad, that they leave a scent for the rest of the pack. We're talking about when I was sitting there casting the print, I'm looking at the moon and I'm hearing like coyotes off in the distance, like legit a little bit scary.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm reading about wolves all day long. And that was one of the aha moments. Like, they're up on their tippy toes and then they drop down.
Right. And if that is the quote unquote reality of this story, is that there was a wolf scavenging a fish at the Shenango Reservoir, that's still a big story, That's still really important and needs to be looked into. And you're doing that work.
Legit. Yes. I mean, I know this is just video, but I have all kinds of notes that I kept.
Oh my gosh.
I started writing notes about wolves and stuff.
That's
I
wild.
wrote. Today I was going through and I was writing down going through all of our encounters that we've interviewed people, and I was looking at all of the dogman reports that we've taken, and some of them were in that area, some of them were not. But I think about the witnesses too, the people that have witnessed these things physically, seen them, and they're all walks of life. The people that have seen these things,
right? And I think that probably tracks with folks that say they see other cryptid creatures like this. Is there's the old trope that it's only rednecks or hicks out in the woods seeing stuff like this, and that's not the case. It's not the case. It is people, like you mentioned, all walks from life, and I think that's important to the narrative.
And it's not even just people that are prone to being in the woods a lot of the times, like people are hunting or bird watchers or avid hikers, because like you said, you're in an area that is right outside one of the larger communities between Erie and Pittsburgh, and that is the Sharon region, which is like Sharon, Sharpsburg's right below the area you were at. I mean, these are not... I mean, it's an interesting place in the world, especially in the Atlantic and New England states, because we go from having pretty big towns and really cities to, a few blocks away, and you're in a pretty thick wooded area. And that's exactly, you are right on the cusp of that. And so because the dam's there, there's people that could drive a mile from their house and take their dogs out to the park like that. So yeah, it really is everybody.
It's like that. That's one thing that's really bothered me. Like when we first had this encounter, and with what we believed was Bigfoot, I had to really stop and think to myself, this is a populated area. And then you start really thinking about it. Like even coyotes, they're opportunistic. They're close to communities. All of this stuff plays into your mind about like the whole area. And then, like energetically, I'll talk about this too. Like I think about how the Shenango is this very spiritual place. I take it that way. It's very spiritual to me, and it has this incredible energy. And I started researching ley lines in the area, and I realized that this is an intersection of what's called the Great Lake ley lines and the mound builder ley lines. So the mound builders were these Adena Indians that had these mounds. Like you'll find the mounds in Ohio, the Serpent Mound, and it's all energetic. So I mean, I'm constantly thinking a little bit more about how things happen and why they happen in certain areas. And that's one of the things that I think about when I think about the Shenango. Is there's also this other side of Shenango, and there's also this other side of Lake Moraine. They were both areas that were developed about the same time in the early
Mhm.
mid 60s, early 60s, mid 60s, where they gave people an opportunity to vacate their property because of eminent domain. They were going to build this
Mhm.
dams, and they were building this thing to manage water. And both areas have really interesting things happen.
Amen.
Yeah.
No, I think that everything you're saying is absolutely spot on, Jamie. And as someone who, I mean, I don't spend as much time in Moraine as you guys do in Shenango, but I spend a lot of time up in Moraine. And you're right. There's a lot of places like this. Goddard up north of us,
Yes.
and other places like that. And again, that tracks with, you know, both historically, where you see a lot of, you know, just like weird folklore that you know, isn't what you would expect. And I think that's why places like this are so interesting, because really they challenge, like you mentioned, they kind of challenge our expectations about how both nature and spiritual elements and paranormal elements, how they react and how they act in the world. I think that's why it's so fascinating, because like there's so, like you said, there's so much that goes into a place like the Shenango Reservoir. Some of it is easily seen, some of it isn't.
Well, and even cities like Los Angeles have coyotes running among because, you know, that's what they are like. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious with all, I mean, I doubt you've even been able to sift through all the feedback and comments that has been occurring with these, but I have to ask, has anybody accused you guys of any shenanigans or anything, or has it been like mostly positive, mostly just really was excited about this? This is just is it a bunch of excited people are like, I'm very excited and I have no idea what that is, but you know, I'm kind of curious of what the feedback has been.
I mean, I think this is there's two different ways to look at this. Jenny and I are in this Bigfoot community, and I like to think that we're well respected. We have a lot of people that respect us. I've never had anyone ever question our integrity with anything that we've found. You know, they question, like, you know, it's okay to disagree and agree, but nobody's ever said that to us. And the only thing I can say about the only difference with this is that I put it on a forum, which is called Agents of the Unexplained. It's my friend Bill Rigby. I encouraged him to start his own website, his own group, and, you know, it covers all the paranormal. So I just put it up there, and it was just kind of spontaneous. I'm going to show you I found this print. And then I kind of left it and walked away, and then came back, and there were all these comments. Like, I mean, there were like 400 comments, and I tried to read all of them. And then finally I just kind of stepped back away from it.
Right.
But then I had to think to myself, these prints, like, well, the people that commented on the prints are not necessarily people that are in the cryptozoological world, and they're not used to seeing that stuff. So they were making comments like, it's a kangaroo, it's an ostrich, it's a bird. And
well,
really, like, I had to laugh at that, some of that.
Yeah, because kind of like Brendan said, even if it is a wolf and you're like, you know what, after doing more research, it's a wolf, still pretty big. If it's a kangaroo, that's even bigger.
Right.
Because that has even less business.
Yes.
And I don't know much about kangaroos in my defense. I'm not aware of them eating fish so frequently.
No.
Like, I've never heard of a kangaroo in the outback hopping up to the old fishing hole.
I could be wrong, but I think it was Infant Horror. There was some old story that's pretty popular in the communities of a three-legged like cryptid. A lot of people think that it was in fact a kangaroo somewhere like Illinois or something, but I've at least heard of something like this before. But even then, that's kind of wild and kind of crazy, you know?
And eating a fish. Now, if it were a thylacine, but of course no one's seen any of those since the 30s.
Don't get me started on thylacines. I am very convinced that they're still around. I'm all about them.
No, but I do think that's important to say, is that a lot of the people that were commenting are not people that are out in the community or looking at prints very often. And I'm sorry, you were about to say something more. I'll let you go.
Well, you know, the other thing that's weird, and I always look at the universe as like it's always bringing stuff to us and communicating with us, and we don't always know how. Jenny and I were just we were just asked by Small Town Monsters to help with a documentary that they were doing. Of all things, Dogman.
Yeah.
And they asked us if we had any reports. So we went out with the film crew and we were telling them about the reports, and we gave them witnesses in Mercer County that had these things, seen these things. We've never seen a dogman. And they had us on camera, and we're talking about the witnesses and then our own Bigfoot encounter. And then they ended up using us in the documentary. And I was like, oh my gosh, like they did use us in the documentary. I was just really there to help them out with their project. And they used us, and then go forward and we find this print. Like, it's kind of weird.
Right.
I was going to say, they're going to have to do an addendum now.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's very weird. The other thing is, I was going through my baby book. Like, my mom gave me this baby book from when I was a little kid. She's passed away, but in my baby book, the very first place that I went after, my parents left the house and took me to my first outing, in the baby book, she wrote that they took me to this wolf sanctuary in Pennsylvania.
See, I was waiting for you just to say up to the Shenango, but no.
That's even
wolf
wilder.
Sanctuary. Yeah, a gray wolf sanctuary.
I wasn't even aware we had.
That is cool. That is so cool.
Yeah.
And it's funny how, like you said, the universe kind of puts stuff in front of us sometimes. And, with a lot of these experiences, like you kind of talked about the last time you were on the show with us, a lot of these experiences that, have like a spiritual element tie back to the things we care about, like, the places we spend a lot of time, our families, our relationships, things like that. When you start taking a step back, like you guys are, you see how this stuff is a lot more connected, I think, than...
Yes.
Yeah. That makes you wonder how this all works.
Thank you for saying that, because, I think that sometimes people go through this world and they go through life and they look at things as like they're there. This is here. This is a chair. This is a telephone. This is a wall. And I look at things as like magical. Like, I look at things around me and I think to myself, I make that connection with like the spiritual element of it, because we've done the ghost hunting. We've experienced some really cool things, and that's the way I look at things. And most people would probably just ignore it. Like, for instance, like if your dad said a certain thing to you and he passed away, and then you hear that thing over and over again, I'm making that connection.
Right. And I think that a lot of that comes down to, and this kind of goes along with your guys' micro study, is people, I think, that are observant and people who spend a lot of time taking stock of the world around them are more likely to see those connections if they're not just being as pedestrian, which isn't, like, again, not to say it's necessarily a negative thing, like a better or worse, but it's a different way of looking at the world.
I give myself permission to experience things as I can, as fully as I can.
Coming back to, because you'd mentioned, and I mean, you've been cramming for the exam now for the past week or so, that you not knowing too much about dogmen and not being aware if they had any casts of supposed prints. I'm certainly not aware. And of course, we know, like Bigfoot, there are numerous prints, and some of them are well known and well documented and debated. I would figure that just even a cursory examination of the lore and the evidence of dogmen stuff, that you would have encountered evidence of some prints. Based on what you've said earlier, it doesn't sound like you have. And I'm wondering if this means that the region is now going to become a ground zero of sorts in the wake of your publishing this photo and having this conversation and the other conversations you're bound to have as a result of this experience, and getting these casts at an unfortunate time of the evening.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that Shenango and Mercer County's been on that radar with the cryptid community as with that element. It's just not something that I've had in the forefront of my mind.
Right.
It just has never been. So to have this print is kind of cool. And if it is a print that is considered dogman, it's probably pretty groundbreaking to have a print, because I don't really know if they exist. The guy from Maine that's part of the North American Dogman Project was super excited about the print, which then made me excited. But then I don't want to get too excited because
you just
don't know.
Right. Right. And I think that measured approach that you're taking is, again, like the most healthy way you can be going about it. And it's funny how stuff like this has like a initiatory element to it, where you mentioned like you've been doing so much work in this area, but only had like a passing understanding of this deeper lore that you're now a part of, whether you like it or not,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting how things expand when we don't expect it all the time. It's not like you were out there looking for something that was going to change a lot of things for you, but this
Well,
makes you think differently now.
Well, let's be glad too that you were the ones to find it, just because. Right. Oh, there's some sort of alarm going off. I apologize. But just be glad that we're all glad that, and everybody else should be glad that you were the ones to come across it, because I don't know how many casual voyeurs would have gone back the next day to make a cast.
This is true. This is true.
Right. Now that we're kind of to this point with your studying here, what is like your next step? Is it just to continue researching more? Is it to get this print in front of more people? What's the go forward plan?
I think the go forward for Jenny and I both is that we're going to continue hiking, going to continue observing, and what I'm going to do on this Dogman level is I'm going to listen, and I'm going to listen to the people that are contacting me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to listen openly with, my mind, and try to take in what they say, because, I really don't know, and I'm just going to keep looking.